Hello and welcome to the Topher Project. I'm Topher Field and I help people like yourself to stay up to date with the world as it changes around you and hopefully wrap your minds around some very confusing things that happen very quickly. And one thing that certainly happened in the very early hours of the morning was an update to Victoria's social cohesion and anti-vilification laws. And someone who was there all the way to the bitter end of the 4 a.m. debate was MP David Limbrick. He's no stranger to my channel and my work, hopefully no stranger to you. David Limbrick MP, thank you so much for joining me once again.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you and the rest of the Victorian Parliament has just about had to pull an all-nighter, sorry, the upper house, I should say, has had to pull an all-nighter on this legislation. Firstly, for those who aren't familiar, Victoria's wanted to ram through this update to vilification laws, social cohesion laws. What's the problem that they're trying to solve, given that we already have things like Section 18C of the Federal Racial Anti-Discrimination Act? We also have things like the hate speech laws, the federal ones that were rammed through recently on the back of the caravan bomb hoax. What is the remaining problem that Victorian government sees that they're trying to solve here?
Yeah, these laws have actually been a very long time coming. They were the outcome of an inquiry that was initially initiated by Fiona Patten in previous parliaments. And the outcome of that inquiry into vilification in Victoria had a bunch of recommendations. The government agreed to those recommendations in the last term of parliament, but didn't actually do anything. And I knew right from after I got elected this term that this was going to be something that was going to come up. It was going to be a big burden on free speech. What they're trying to solve here is they're concerned about different groups being attacked or ridiculed or held in serious contempt or a whole bunch of other issues. And initially it was really focused around transgender issues and these sorts of things. But then later on, people started thinking, after October 7th, they were concerned about anti-Semitism and then, people attacking Islamic people, Muslim people, and all these other situations. But effectively what the laws do is they have two sets of schemes within the laws. There's a criminal scheme, which is for very serious things. And then there's a civil scheme, which is handled by the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission. Actually, the civil scheme is more problematic. It will have a bigger chilling effect on speech, I think. But it's effectively if you incite or say something that is likely to incite severe ridicule, serious contempt, revulsion of another person or group of persons with a bunch of what they call protected characteristics. And we've always had in Victoria the Racial and Religious Tolerance Act, so that had the protected characteristics of race and religion, but now we've expanded that to a whole group of characteristics now. So things such as sex, gender identity, disability status, et cetera, et cetera.
There's a lot of people who would say, though, that sounds nice. We shouldn't have people being vilified on the basis of those sorts of characteristics. So can you give us a rundown of what is your objection to such laws being on the books?
There's two main points. The first is around principles. Libertarians see this as a severe restriction on freedom of speech and think that it will stifle legitimate debate between people about reasonable things. The second objection is around actual effectiveness. I actually think these types of laws are highly counterproductive. I gave the example in my speech in Parliament of the Nazi salute ban. Now, I was one of the few people that opposed that. I didn't oppose it because I like Nazis. In fact, I loathe them. But I just felt that it was counterproductive. And I said to the Attorney General at the time that I'm concerned that you'll create a martyr here. And the Attorney General didn't seem too worried about that. They said, the laws will be effective if they're not used. Well, within hours of the laws coming into effect, someone had been charged and they're using that as, they're trying to make him out to be some sort of hero because he challenged the state. And I'm concerned that these sorts of laws will make exactly the same sort of thing happen again.
Yeah. Well, certainly in my observation, making these sorts of things illegal tends to add to their street cred amongst the very vulnerable people that we are trying to reach here. And so unfortunately, in my observation, I've often seen a counterproductive effect. Was there any reference in all of this debate, as you've just given us a rundown there? This predates the recent caravan bomb scare that was up in Sydney. But was there any reference to that? Was that leverage used to try and manipulate people to support in this legislation?
In short, no. It wasn't really related to that at all. Like this was in train a long time before any of that happened. Yeah.
All right. So, for those who don't sort of understand the processes involved in Parliament, it can seem very, very odd. Firstly, that there is so much wheeling and dealing that goes on to get something like this passed, but also that you were there until 4 o'clock in the morning. So, can you give us just a bit of an idea of what's the actual process that was being gone through? And also, just a question really for my curiosity. This feels really familiar to me in relation to the permanent pandemic powers that Daniel Andrews rammed through. I believe that was in 2021, I think it was, that he rammed those through, having ultimately won over the support through wheeling and dealing of a few of the upper house crossbench. That, of course, went until very, very late in the morning. You were one of the people standing against that legislation once again. What's going on here? Help an ordinary punter to understand the process and how we end up with these sorts of spectacles.
Well, the one similarity between the pandemic bill and this bill is that people learn that when libertarians hate bills, you end up debating them till the early hours of the morning. But yeah, so like the process is this, right? So you have in Parliament, you have what's called a second reading debate where everyone gets up and gives a speech and says what they think about the bill. I actually did my second reading speech on that 4 weeks ago. It's because this bill's been stalled for a while. The government adjourned it off because they didn't have the numbers. The Greens didn't support it at the time. The Greens actually abstained in the lower house. And then they brought it back after they'd done some sort of deal with the Greens. And there was actually an amendment from the Greens that the government agreed to. And so what happens when it comes back is they have what's called a committee stage. And that gives you an opportunity to ask questions to the minister. In this case, it was the minister representing the Attorney General. She used to be the Attorney General up until recently. This was Jacqueline Symes. She's the leader of the government in the upper house. And you can ask as many questions as you like, as long as they're related to the bill, and there's a few other restrictions. And also it goes through those amendments. So you can actually ask the mover of the amendment questions. So people were actually asking the Greens MPs questions, which was interesting. But yeah, you can ask as many questions as you like, and there's no limit. So I had lots of questions. So I was asking questions until 3:30 in the morning. So yeah, it was... and then the Greens only showed these amendments in the chamber. So they weren't circulated to the wider community. I didn't have any chance to consult with anyone on it. And the government and the Greens didn't care because they'd done a deal and they were going to ram it through, and they didn't care about that. They just wanted to pass it. The Greens actually put up 2 sets of amendments and then withdrew one for some strange reason. And if you go to my X account, you can actually see the 2 amendments that they put up, and for some reason they withdrew one. I'm not sure what happened there. But then the second one was accepted by the government. There was also another amendment by Legalise Cannabis to do with the implementation date. I actually supported that one. It brought the civil scheme. So there's, as I said, there's 2 schemes. There's a criminal scheme and a civil scheme. The criminal scheme comes into effect in September this year. So not long. I'm skeptical whether they can actually manage it in that time. And then the civil scheme was scheduled to come into effect in 2027. The amendment brought it forward to June 2026. I supported that, and my reason for supporting that was I want Victorians to get a taste of this before the next election. So there you go.
I see.
If we're going to have it, we might as well let Victorians experience it, and then they can decide whether they like the government that brought it in or not.
Well, the accelerationists amongst my audience, of which there are a few, will be cheering you on right now for that approach.
Yes.
Let it burn.
That was a very accelerationist thing to do, and that was exactly what I was thinking. Yes, if we're going to have it through, we might as well bring it down as soon as we can. So, yep.
Yeah. So, David, I'm not wanting to be downbeat, but it seems as though it's very, very difficult for someone like yourself in your position. I mean, in the previous government, you, of course, had your fellow libertarian Tim Quilty alongside you, and on different issues, you do find allies in different places. But it does certainly feel like in Victoria, at the very least, there's a bit of a losing battle going on to defend freedom of speech, to defend civil liberties, these sorts of things. We have a federal election coming up, and then, of course, it's a little while before the next Victorian state election. What do you see going forward? Is this just a defensive battle indefinitely, or do you see us being able to turn anything around anytime soon?
Well, if we're going to look at the silver lining here, I think there's one very big silver lining that happened here, in that the opposition opposed it on the grounds of free speech. And this did not happen in New South Wales. They had similar laws go through recently that had bipartisan support.
Mm.
And I think, part of that is due to what we were doing in pointing, like trying to raise the profile of this issue. And
Sure.
I know that it was divisive internally within the Liberal Party. They had different people that supported it and others that didn't. But ultimately, they came out hard against it. And Brad Batten even said after the laws passed that, something along the lines of this is an offence to free speech, and the Liberal Party defends free speech. That's new. That's new. And you don't hear them doing that very often. So, I mean, that was a change. And so, look, I think, politically, my goal now, firstly, the goal is we want more libertarians in Parliament, but secondary goal is I would love the Liberal Party to have a clear commitment to do two things. Firstly, to repeal these laws, and secondly, to overhaul VARIOC, the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission. Needs an overhaul from top to bottom.
Yeah. Well, in one sense, those two things go hand in hand. I suspect as libertarians gain more traction inside parliaments around Australia, we are more likely at that point to see the Liberals begin to return to some of their values as expressed by Menzies when they were founded. That's just my personal opinion. But David Limbrick MP, thank you so much for joining us. I'll let you get back to your work and into the weekend shortly. Thank you so much for all that you do and for doing it even all the way through to 4 o'clock in the morning.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.